The case against Robel Phillipos attracted national attention for its connection to the Boston Marathon bombing. But his defense team contends it boils down to a stoned and confused college student swept up in something he didn't understand. That argument didn't sway jurors, though, who convicted the 21-year-old of misleading federal agents about what he witnessed 3 days after the bombing, when two other friends of bombing suspect Jahar Tsarnaev removed evidence from Tsarnaev's dorm room. Those friends are awaiting sentencing in Essex jail after being convicted of obstructing justice. Tsarnaev's trial is slated to start January 30th. Phillipos' conviction on 2 counts of lying to investigators could each carry a sentence of 8 years. He's at home in Cambridge tonight, back under house arrest until his sentencing on January 29th. U.S. Attorney Carmen Ortiz says she's gratified by the verdict and that Phillipos made the work of investigators more difficult in the wake of one of the most significant events in the city's history.
Thousands of ordinary citizens assisted law enforcement in identifying and in locating the alleged perpetrators. Today, a federal jury concluded that Robel Phillipos did just the opposite.
Attorneys for Phillipos plan to appeal the verdict, and I'm joined now by 2 of them, Susan Church and Derige Demise. Welcome to Greater Boston.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're both disappointed, but since this really came down to questioning the jury about whether he lied, he had admitted lying at some point to investigators. You couldn't have been surprised that he was convicted on that.
We're actually surprised. The jury did not credit the government's alleged confession. They presented a statement signed by Robel. However, we were able to show that it was a product of an extreme duress. He was in a room for 4.5 hours with a very experienced interrogator who employed a very arcane and archaic technique, including a visual maximization technique, several threats and intimidation. And if you look at the verdict, they rejected the allegation that he knew about the backpack, the evidence that was removed from the room, or its destruction. And the guilty verdict relates to the statement whether he was in the room or not.
I understand. But Susan, after the fact, there were some texts that went back and forth between Robel and some of his friends. And they were damning to an extent because they made it seem like he did know, even though your defense was he claimed he was stoned out of his mind. But they said to him, you know, if you're approached by the feds, you got to tell them everything you know. And it made it sound like he knew something.
Well, that is actually the opposite. The text messages, and I think they've been reported widely as having absolutely no knowledge contained within them whatsoever. In fact, there was evidence that he, for example, which didn't make it into the trial, but evidence that he said to one of his friends, like, the FBI's accused me of lying, but I don't remember being in that dorm room. There was a key statement that was kept out of evidence because of the hearsay rules that he allegedly, that Diaz Kabradayev, who is the individual who did take the backpack, said to his girlfriend, Bayan, Robel knew nothing about the backpack. And that is what the jury found, is that he didn't know anything about the backpack, that he didn't know anything about the fireworks. But he was counseled by
those emails, those texts, to at least play straight, and the jury didn't believe he did. Oh, let me go back to something you said, though, Derge, about the government's questioning or interrogation, whatever term. Did you have access to anything that even resembled a transcript? Because I know they don't record these things, which has got to be a frustration. It's frustration to everybody, but it's got to be a frustration to you. Do you know how that interrogation came down?
We actually had no transcript. They televised it to another room where another agent was watching. They had visual and sound transmission. However, they chose not to record them. And
did somebody take notes?
Nobody took notes. And what we were able to do is show during cross-examination of the actual interrogator that a lot of techniques that he used came to light. And in fact, I was surprised that he made various admissions about the technique.
I mean, if you look at the jury's verdict, the jury clearly rejected this statement that he provided, and we think one of the reasons is
the signed statement.
The signed statement, because that signed statement contains allegations that he saw the fireworks. The jury acquitted him on any allegation that he saw the fireworks, any allegations that he saw the backpack. I wanted to address something that Carmen Ortiz says, which is that our client somehow was unwilling to help. That's all our client did was help. Michael Dukakis came and testified that he spoke to this gentleman. If this gentleman didn't want to help, he would have asked Michael Dukakis, who's a lawyer, can you please help me? I don't know what to do. All he wanted to do is help. By 11 o'clock on the morning of the bombing, he was speaking to a friend saying, yeah, you're going to call the police? I don't really know much, but go ahead. That was Greg Maslin. He testified for the defense that our client was giving his friend the go-ahead, was speaking to the police. He spoke to the police at 1 o'clock. He called them back at 9:30 and said, where are you? So this wasn't an individual who didn't want to help. That's all he wanted to do was help in this case.
Is this a matter for you, and I don't want to be dismissive of the guilty verdict, but is it a matter more of sentencing? I mean, I think there's a common sort of sensibility out there, if you will, that not only Robel Phillipos, but the others are guilty of just incredible stupidity. I mean, just pathetic stupidity. And that they've probably, that they've ruined their lives to an extent. They've already been in jail in the case of the other two guys for 1.5 years. That it's about what the punishment should be as opposed to the crime.
From the outset, we said this was a case that should not have been brought by the government against Robel Phillipos.
What about the other two?
Well, I don't want to comment about that. Maybe there's legitimate reason to bring a case against the other two. They actually removed evidence and destroyed it. There was the roommate of Johar Tsarnaev who was there in the room while the backpack was being removed. Wasn't able to, he testified he did not see the backpack or the firework. Robel was in the same position, and
he was
the
never
roommate
charged.
was not
He
charged.
let them into the room. He opened the door for them. He saw a text from Johar
So answer
saying,
my
take what
question.
you want.
Is this about the sentence? I mean,
it is now, of course,
Yeah.
that the jury has spoken, but and we hope that there is proportionality.
Are there minimums that have already been applied in this case?
There's no minimum mandatory. The judge has discretion to sentence him from probation to a maximum of 16 years. Of course, it's going to depend on what the government is going to ask and what the probation department is going to put together in the pre-sentence report. And I think this judge in particular is interested in fairness, and I think he will bring proportionality to the charge. So we're hoping.
Is Robel going to be helpful as a witness against Johar Tsarnaev?
He knows nothing about Johar Tsarnaev except that he's absolutely furiously angry with a man who he believes now killed innocent and maimed innocent people.
He must have known him.
He doesn't know anything. He never knew anything about Tsarnaev being radical. He hadn't been on campus in over a month.
He was on probation for being a dopehead or something?
He had problems with marijuana use. His mother said, you're not doing well in school either, so why should I continue paying this money? And he was only on campus that day to meet with school administrators about his marijuana use. It's the irony and the unluckiness in the case.
What is your best hope, that he just gets probation?
Well, we hope he would, if that's a possibility, of course. But we will put together a very strong package, and we'll advocate for him to receive the most lenient sentence he can get.
All right. Thank you both for coming here today after such a long trial and a long day. Susan Church and Denise Diriget, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. We want to know what you think. Did prosecutors overreach in the case against Robel Phillipos, or was justice served today? Email us at greaterboston@wgbh.org, and we'll read some of your comments on the air tomorrow night.